Hello, KCIW listeners, and welcome to Curry Café, where we put together a panel of volunteers and guests who discuss various topics from whimsical and fun to more serious subjects.
Well, that was the beautiful, melodious voice of Rick McNamer, who unfortunately, when you hear that canned open, it means he's not here today. The poor guy's having a bit sniffles and is under the weather. And so we miss you. We completely miss you, Rick. But we certainly have the famous radio personality, Ray Gary, with Curry Café. And tell us about the show today.
Okay, but before I get into the show, I just want to mention one quick thing, very quickly. There is a lot going on in the country right now. We may be in one of the most serious situations we've been in, maybe even since the Revolutionary War. So if you're one of these people who does not pay attention to politics or watch the news, please start doing that now. And if you are have a friend like that, I don't read paper or watch the news, tell them they better start paying attention. It's really getting very, very serious. So I will then turn it over to our guest today, who will tell you who she is and what she's going to talk about.
Good afternoon. I'm Jackie Antunes. I am the executive director of our county's Child Advocacy Center, Wally's House. And I am here at Ray's invitation to answer questions, to talk about what we do and how we started, where we're going, whatever you guys want to know about Wally's House. I'm here to answer questions and
to help the questions that we want to answer, you can text us at 541-661-4098, 541-661-4098. Now, Wally's House is... Tell me about Wally's House.
So Wally's House is one of 24 child advocacy centers in the state of Oregon and the only one in Curry County. So we do forensic interviews. We provide advocacy. We do medical exams that are called a Carly's Law exam. We also provide mental health for those that come through our facility that have made a disclosure. Our therapist is trained in trauma-focused cognitive behavior therapy. We have also added a prevention specialist, so we are starting to accept invitations to present to adults right now to teach them how to intervene and identify when there might be some kind of abuse going on and prevent it. So we have that. We're also currently seeking a curriculum that is appropriate for children and youth to do presentations for them as well. In our field, we've learned that too many times there's been people go and talk to kids or try to teach kids how to protect themselves, but they haven't been really focused on teaching adults to keep an eye out on children and how to intervene and what to do. Here we have the most precious commodity in our children, and we're trying to make them be responsible for staying safe when it should be us being the guards of their futures and protecting them.
I, originally developed an interest in this subject when I was a foster parent. And the way I got to be a foster parent, Jackie might find a little interesting. I was stationed in Nome, and I had a case to work in a nearby village, and there was a social worker whose office was upstairs, also had a case there, and we decided to share the ride. So on the 2-hour drive, in order to pass some time, I said, well, what do social workers do anyway? And among other things, she said that we also have, develop and monitor foster parents. What's that, says I. So she begins to tell me about what it's all about, how you take in this child who might have some family difficulties and blah, blah, blah. And I said, oh, that's interesting. You might come by and talk to my wife someday. She might be interested in something like that. Very next morning, bright and early, that same social worker was on my doorstep with a box of Pampers and an infant. That was the entirety of my background check, my training, everything that went along with being a foster parent. And that situation didn't change very much in Alaska for quite a long time. My second foster child was a very similar situation, panicking, social worker knocking on the door. We have this girl coming in. The plane's going to land in an hour. We have no place to put her. Well, I can't. My brother-in-law just put up a curtain, just do it, begging me to take this kid. Again, no background, no training, no anything. And we fumbled our way through that kid, who wound up changing my life for the better or worse. I don't know, but got me interested in this field. That's my story. That's how I got involved in this. Well, I guess I could go on a little bit more with the kid. It turned out the kid was who lived in a village, was very badly sexually abused from I don't know when, very, very early. When she was about 6, her mother shot her father with a shotgun as he came home drunk after being out partying, and didn't kill him, though, but he lay there on the floor with a stomach wound. She tried to shoot him again, but didn't realize she had to recock the shotgun. Now, these are this kid's earliest memories. Anyway, we acquired her in the same way and started to learn about all the difficulties kids have for their entire life. At the time, we didn't even know she'd been sexually abused. I mean, she was just a little kid, that seemed. Come on, you can't have that. Yeah, you can. And that's the hardest thing for people to realize, that it happens, and there's no type. They're not all locomotive breath. They're, my famous arrest was a Baptist minister on Father's Day. So they can come from all walks of life.
Very true. Very true.
1 in 4 women, is that the statistic? It seems that might be low.
Well, that's who's reporting.
They're right.
I mean, they say 1 in 10 children is what they're saying, and they break down the statistics, between males and females. And I didn't bring that with me, but too many.
Too many, and too many for men too. And the trauma is the issue, seems to me, because that's the fog that sticks over people and they carry forward in life and have to recover from. And everything, you had quite a long list of attributes that Wally House is working on. That sounded incredible.
Well, we also are doing, we have a contract with our Oregon Department of Human Services local district, where we have a worker that when we have a child that's either at risk of being removed from the home or is being returned to the home, she does in-home safety and reunification services. So she is part of the team that works with the family. The family is asked who they find to be supportive. So it could be might have family or church members that come and check on them and help them and mentor them. The caseworkers come and help them, as well as their support staff. And then our person also is one of those that are part of that group that supports families to help parents get through whatever rough spot they're having and get them some skills so that they don't lose their child, or so that they're successful with their child going forward. So we do that. When you talk about trauma and how it affects us and hangs over us, that it was pretty big, probably about 10 years ago, doing ACEs training, which is the Adverse Childhood Experiences training, where I think both of the CCOs for Oregon Health Authority, Advanced Health, and All Care were partnering to do trainings to help professionals and individuals recognize the trauma that the children and adults that they're working with may or may not have experienced, that may be having an impact on how they're dealing with life, and helps explain why they may or may not be succeeding in their chosen profession or life life path. So it makes a lot of sense. A lot of doctors and nurse practitioners, medical providers are starting to ask their patients, so tell me about your childhood. Tell me, a little bit more about, how things were growing up. They have surveys for them and that type of thing, and they can help discern, what they might be able to do to help with that patient's health. Because what they've learned in the studies is our ACEs not only determine how we're going to be walking through life, but it also impacts our health. So they've gone back and they've determined that type of life experiences shows different people can develop cancer, diabetes. Not just genetics does it. Our experiences and how our body deals with that emotional trauma. It's quite fascinating. There's a book called The Deepest Well. The author is her first name is Nadine. She's a pediatrician from California, and it's quite fascinating.
And I don't think it's just the kids that are traumatized. I think this telephone and social media traumatizes the entire society, and it's part and parcel of our issues as adults. We are not terribly well prepared to deal with the traumas that the kids are going through because we haven't yet healed from them ourselves.
I'd agree with you.
As far as other family members, they're generally shocked to find out that this is going on. I used to do interviews, and I would go to the home and talk to the mother, and they would very frequently be in very heavy denial. No, we would never do anything like that. And if they also could not understand how, if it was an adopted kid or a stepchild or something, that was different than their natural child. It's no difference at all. What happens in most cases is you have to drop, if you're going to become part of this, you have to drop your inhibitions to the point to where it's no longer an inhibition. And it generally comes on gradually for various reasons. And after a while, you or the person may become caught up in the idea that this is perfectly all right, this is what I should be doing. I frequently tell the investigator or tell the child at the time that I'm going to show you what happens so you know how it's supposed to happen and not so it's random or done in an abusive way. And they don't consider themselves to be abusive.
Wow. We have ways of fooling ourselves.
Yeah, we hear
and part of it is just talking ourselves into it now, isn't it? Which is exactly what Wally's house is trying to fix with us, it sounds like.
We are a referral service, so actually in Oregon, the child advocacy centers are a state-mandated part of the investigative process. So the legislature passed statute that requires that law enforcement or DHS, whoever the referring party is, call and get a child in if their investigation starts to produce the potential for abuse. So they, and as well as there's statute surrounding Carly's Law.
So where do you fit in the line here? We would get most of our referrals from social workers who got them from teachers or neighbors or something, and but you are not part of the state. I guess so. Things probably come to you after they've been investigated somewhere.
So someone reports abuse to either the hotline or law enforcement, and the dispatch sends out law enforcement, or the screener sends a referral in, and a caseworker goes or law enforcement, and sometimes they go together, like you were talking about your cases, and they talk to the reporting person. They look in on the child, and talk to the family, and they determine, we need to find out from this child what exactly happened. And so we have trained forensic interviewers. They are trained in the Oregon child abuse protocols on how to question a child in a way that's not intimidating, it's not leading, it's open, and allows the child the opportunity to tell their narrative of what happened. Back in the 80s, when things were getting really, really, people were getting really heightened on their understanding that abuse was happening, sexual and physical abuse, there was questioning that went on, and the children were interviewed multiple times, and stories differed from one interview to the next. And so those that were in the field of child abuse said, we need to come up with some way to interview children that is not going to be perceived as leading or telling the child what to say. And so there are several modalities of child forensic interviewing from, there's the state version that we have in Oregon that is approved by the National Children's Alliance. They all, you all have to start with, letting the child know where the cameras are, what's going on, and then there are people watching in another room. And it's all, the child gets a tour of the facility. They get to know where people are going to be, who they are, what the whole process is. The children and families that come to our advocacy centers and Wally's house know what's happening in the whole building and what the purpose, of the building is. Sometimes we try really hard to make sure that our parents or those that are, that have the children know what the process is. So beforehand.
So if the case was referred to the police, say at Gold Beach, they would go to you and conduct the interview in your place?
We conduct the interview. Law enforcement doesn't do that interview.
But they sit in on it?
They are in another room watching it. It's just the child and the interviewer in the interview room.
And this is so you can have actionable outcomes from these interviews that will work for the child in a court of law should it ever get there. It sounds like to me, because with the earlier situations, maybe there was some issues with that. Sounded like if leading questions are asked, you take that into court, all of a sudden it becomes a way of discounting the child's.
Very, very specific guidelines that you have to stay within during these interviews. Primarily the leading question.
Yeah.
We used to use what they call anatomically correct dolls. Do they still do that?
We do not, and several of our centers around the state do not. If someone uses those dolls, it's because they've got a lot of experience using those dolls and a lot of training using those dolls. Now we rely on that child to draw us pictures.
That's better. I was never trained in the use of the dolls, so I never used. I knew what they consisted of, but
We have a text, friends. We have a text from our friend. We have a text from Rick McNamer, who wants to know, I hope you're doing good, Guy, what a sad and tragic ordeal this is. Agreed. What if someone suspects there might be child abuse going on, and what would be the proper first step to report it?
If someone suspects that there's child abuse going on, because I've had people call me and ask me, what do I do? And I tell them, list down on a piece of paper what makes you think that there's abuse, and the name of the child, the name of the parent, if you know the address, so that those that you're reporting to have an easier time of finding the child and the family to look into things. And then you state very logically and calmly what you've witnessed, what your concerns are, and why. That way, because I think sometimes we get overexcited and we can just start to ramble when we try to call in something. We've seen an accident or something going on. So if we suspect there's child abuse, try to just make sure that we have the information that they're going to be asked. How old is the child? If you know that, if you don't know that, well, I think they're about 5, but the child's name, the adult or the situation. If there's something going on, in front of you where, somebody's yanking on their child out to the car and the child is, there's times where, there's going to be a kid pitching a fit and stuff, but there's a difference there. I mean, you can call 911 and report it to your law enforcement also if it feels like that child's in immediate danger. So.
And there's a contact number for Wally's?
No, actually, I have the Oregon State.
Or the Oregon State.
Yeah,
yes.
Oregon State Department of Human Services abuse hotline, and that is 888-503-7233. And that it's actually for reporting, elder abuse as well as child abuse. So there's different cues and numbers to dial when you dial.
Jackie, give that number again for people who were just grabbing their pencils.
It is 888-503-7233.
Sweet. So
That
Rick,
72 spells safe, by the way. If you forget the numbers, SAFE.
Very cool.
About reporting, I have something I think is kind of. I worked in a very small town initially when I got into this, of about 500 people, and then there was another town a few miles away that had 500 or 600 people, and I kind of became known for being able to hunt these guys out. Like I mentioned earlier, I think I did them while we were on the Baptist minister on Father's Day, things like that, and almost always when I had arrested one of these and the word got out, somebody would come into my office and say, "Boy, it's about time you got a hold of him. We've all known about that forever." And at the same time, if there was a dog that didn't get the proper amount of water, or there was a horse that showed a rib in its side, and people would be banging my door constantly, take care of that dog. But they don't want to get involved when it amounts to a child or the family. And because these were little towns, everybody knew each other too. So I always thought that was very odd that people would ignore the child.
Unfortunate.
You're exactly right. In fact, one of the things here in Oregon that is quite concerning to those of us who work in the child abuse realm and even the adult services realm, you talked about the dog and the horse. It's easier for someone to take action if an animal is abused than if a child or an elder is abused and has suffered some kind of harm. If that person cannot verbalize how badly it hurt, it's very hard for prosecutors to make the case and get a conviction sometimes on some of these cases.
Cannot or will not, just is incapable.
Right. Incapable.
Yeah.
It's a good way of putting it.
Because trauma does that to you. Trauma makes you shut up when you should have spoken up sometimes.
Sometimes.
Trauma is traumatic.
There's, I can think of, several years ago, there was an infant whose parents went and out on a date, and they left the child with an adult. And when they came home, the child was quite battered by the person caring for the child, and they could not get a conviction because the child couldn't tell the investigators or how badly it hurt. It was very frustrating for people, and that wasn't in this county. It's a case in Oregon.
Did they go after the parents after that?
Well, no, the parents were the ones who were upset that
no, I completely understand,
I mean, that person basically got away with it because their victim was unable to be verbal.
The child was left in your care for 3 hours, and 3 hours later after your care, this was the result, but there was no way to physically prove that reality in a court of law.
Or that person, or how badly. I think it's the charging part of it as far as whether it was an assault 1, 4, all of those. It's very hard for that piece of it. We do, though, in Oregon, interesting that case went the way that it did, because in Oregon we have Carly's Law. Carly Sheehan was a 3-year-old who was murdered by abuse. And so the representative or senator from her region went to our state governing bodies and passed a law that if a child has marks, a question, concerning marks, mandatory reporters are to report it, or if somebody reports it, law enforcement and Department of Human Services have only a certain amount of time to photograph those injuries and get that child in to see someone who is trained in diagnosing abuse or ruling it out. And those are called designated medical professionals. We see those cases from time to time here in Curry County where the child has visible marks. And the law is very specific about the injuries and what exactly needs to be done as far as responding to that.
Now, I had initially thought that Wally's house was opening up a new facility here. Is that wrong?
So we have purchased a property right next door to where we are, and we're expanding our services. So like I talked about therapy and prevention, all of our services have been in the house on 8th Street in Gold Beach. And so we've done forensic interviews, we've done the medical exams, we have a really nice waiting room, and we have spots for the kids to let the kids get to play with a lot of toys in the waiting area and stuff. And we just, with mental health services being what they are, not only in our country and state, but within our county, it was hard to get kids who had experienced trauma in to start an assessment and therapy in a timely manner. And so working with grants that had been coming through and funding resources coming through, we started looking for a therapist. The only problem was, where do you put your therapy professional and the waiting room for those families? We had a waiting room, and we're not packed with cases every day for doing interviews and medical exams, but should we develop a program where we had a lot of therapy cases, and do we bump them? What do we do when we have a case where we have to do the investigative part? Because we're trying to protect people's privacy and trying to abide by HIPAA laws. So we started a capital campaign, bought the building, remodeled it. Our contractor is putting in doors and trim right now. So we're hoping here within a few weeks we can start moving things in. We've had to rent a office several blocks down from us for our therapist to do our therapy remotely. And it's hard because it's not a space where she can have a parent wait really in another room and visit with somebody very well. It's so close, and it doesn't allow for the process of trauma-focused cognitive behavior therapy to be worked out like it should. There's a time where you talk to the child, there's a time you talk to the parent, you talk to them together. It's just harder to have that distance in the space that we currently are using for therapy. So we will be able to have a play therapy space, a family therapy space, the therapist's office for individual interviews as well. We'll have the administration move over in that building, because right now, when in the building that we exist in, we have just this really narrow, small space where those that come to watch the interviews watch the child talking to our selected interviewer. And they're sitting on folding chairs and talking over their shoulders and trying to, work as a team when they're kind of just stacked in there awkwardly. It's kind of hard to, you can get probably 4 people in there comfortably on folding chairs, but they can't face each other, or, they have to tweak around. So we will be moving my office over to the new building, and my office will then become the observation room for the multidisciplinary team that comes for that particular interview and investigation. And then our family room will move into the boardroom, so it's farther away from where our interview room is. Sometimes noise carries over into the interview room and distracts our interviewees or the interviewer. So we'll be just kind of stretching out a little bit and getting a little more elbow room.
When I got the job as the sexual abuse investigator in Fairbanks, before I was there, the interviews that were done by the police were just done in an interview room, which is not quite like Dragnet, but it looks like an interview room. Like you say, metal chairs and that type of thing. And so I changed it to where first of all, the victims would sit on steps, so that no matter how tall or short you were, your feet were on the ground. You felt stable. And then I decorated it I couldn't put up like Bambi and things like that, but I made got adventure decals and things like that. It made it a little bit more comfortable. Of course, the murderers, I don't know how that did much for them when they were being interviewed there, but it definitely made the kids feel more comfortable, I think. So it sounds like the Oregon system, these kids never interviewed by police?
Well, no, the police will go out on the call and they'll, talk to the family and
Do the initial.
they'll do an initial, but they don't do a very deep interview because what we've found is, so if you go out and you're an investigator and you do an interview and you get the child to start talking to you in a manner that where they're making a full disclosure, they don't want to go to any place else to talk about what they just told you about again, and not, I have had interviews where when I was doing forensic interviewing, the child was interviewed at depth, and then when they came to our facility, it was like, I already told that to so-and-so. And the nice thing about doing an interview on camera is it saves the child from the trauma of being interviewed multiple times. In Oregon, the accused has the right to face their accuser. So children do have to go to court.
Providing it gets that far.
Yes, exactly. However, a child can go to grand jury, and right now our DA will, talk to the interviewer and say, did you talk to the child? And, the child will go to grand jury and the DA will say, did you talk to Jackie on, at such and such a date? Yes. Did you tell Jackie the truth? Yes. And that's all the child has to say at grand jury. Then the grand jury watches that interview. The only time that a child has to, where the child is subjected to further interview is if it goes to court.
Cross-examination.
Correct. Exactly.
And you just got to deal with that. It's unfortunate. Rick texts us again. He says, at this time, do you feel you have adequate staff and room for your current caseload? You are clearly dealing with that currently. And when does that place open? It sounds like soon, pretty soon. And what is your caseload? How many kids do you see a year? What? Well,
we've seen as many as 50 a year. Most years it's in the 40s, and then of course we, in addition to the ones we provide the medical exams for and the forensic interviews, we also have a service where when a child is brought into care, they have to have specific screening. So they have to have a medical screening, a dental screening, and a mental health screening. Used to be 60 days. Now Oregon Health Authority, I believe it's that entity that has done this, has shortened it to 30 days. And so within the child entering foster care or resource care, the first 30 days they have to have these screenings done. And so we have made our space available to our partners that do those screenings so that the children all come to one space and all the professionals are there. They do those screenings instead of a foster parent or a family member who's had the child placed with them having to chase around to all of those appointments and trying to meet that matrix. If you can imagine, you were a foster parent. If I've had foster parents with 5 children from one family placed with them. And so now they've got to chase around and they've got to do 3 appointments for each child. That's 15 appointments. So by doing what Dr. McKelvey from Coos County, when she was still practicing, called it Fearsome Clinic. And so she started it in the Coos County area. It's come down here. We've made the space available, and we have it's right now being coordinated through Advanced Health. And eventually we would like to be able to take that off of their plate and have the providers to do that. But we're not quite there yet.
You sound like you are, or the Oregon system is what would be called defund the police. A lot of people hear that and they say, oh, you can't defund the police. What that really means is you're not necessarily taking money away from the police, but you are, or if you are, you were putting it in a situation where people who are appropriate to go deal with the situation deal with it. I went to many cases where there was a mental health problem. There was nothing I could do but arrest that person, sometimes very forcefully, and take them to jail. A lot of times I was just sent on cases that I was not equipped to handle. And in my case, I learned how to deal with child sexual abuse and physical abuse. But I was one of very few in my department.
We actually have a law enforcement shortage with our sheriff's department having to cut positions the way they have. So I don't know about defund the police. I have some wonderful partners within law enforcement that we work with from each jurisdiction, from Brookings all the way to Port Orford. And it's been interesting. There have been times where someone's come on duty they're dealing with a case and like, oh, I didn't know we had a child advocacy center here. And they're actually really happy that we have, that they have us to rely on to help them with this case. I think it's not so much defund the police as, grab elbows and partner with the police.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, we have some really good investigators and some really dedicated law enforcement and child welfare workers. I can't say enough good about those that are on our multidisciplinary team. We've got people who really want to see children safe and want to see families heal and made whole if possible.
If one of my neighbors reported me for something like that, who would show up on my door to investigate it?
Well, I don't know what your address is, and I don't know if you want to tell me, but do you live in the county?
No, I live just outside of town in Harbor.
Would depend. Some kind of county.
A cop would be the first one.
If they called the police,
yeah.
If they called DHS, it would be a caseworker. Depending on what the allegations were when the person reported it to the state, they may call law enforcement for somebody to go with them.
Oh yeah, we did that as well.
So, yeah.
Are there in the sheriff's or the Brookings Police, are there specially trained officers?
We have, they have detectives at Brookings PD. The detectives that we had at the sheriff's office have taken jobs elsewhere right now. I'm hoping that we're able to see that build back.
Mm-hmm. I know there's a really bad shortage here right now.
But no, I think in Gold Beach they've got good officers. They step in and they assist where they're needed. Port Orford has a really small force, but they send us our referrals. They'll pick up the phone and call and say, "Hey, I'm emailing you a referral form," and we get on it.
How much do you deal, or do you at all deal with the bad guy?
We don't.
You don't?
No. In fact, if we know someone is a perpetrator, they are not allowed in our building during those services.
Well, that makes sense,
So it's, because they can intimidate a child. We've actually had people that we didn't know were the offender come in with the child and we didn't get the results we wanted because you could tell the kid was off, but you didn't know that individual was there and intimidating them.
So when it comes to taking a child out of the home, I imagine that's the state that what's the criteria for that? We had a lot in Fairbanks. We had these advocates who were against the police, and one of the easy things for them to jump on was us, and they the people doing these kind of cases, and they convinced people that we had no authority, no training, no anything in doing these interviews. Sometimes before I could start an interview, I would have to prove to the parent that I was capable of doing it, that was my job. And but you still have these people talking about this, talking about taking the kids away. They're going to come take your kids away, which didn't happen very often.
No.
And we also had a problem in Fairbanks at that time with runaways. And it was kind of a fad almost to run away. The kids would just get mad at their parents, and they'd go over to their friend's house, other side of town. And then I would get a phone call sometimes. Okay, I'm done running away now. Would you pick me up and take me home? I said, no, I'm not a taxi service. So prior to these kids, and even the thing that we went by, and I don't know if this is still the case, is that kids do not lie about sexual abuse. If a kid told us they were sexually abused, we believed them, and it was true. This, when you're getting up into the teens, a little less. We thought it was because there was a runaway thing, and I want to go. And then they realized, oh wow, the cops came and took Daddy away. Mommy doesn't have Daddy here anymore. And they would recant. Recanting was. Oh God, I don't know what percentage, a very high percentage of the kids that reported.
Well, a part of the issue when there is recantation is, so yes, you're saying, Daddy got taken away, the financial support is gone.
And the mother right away blames the kid.
Yes.
Why did you do this?
Right. You're supposed to keep your mouth shut. No, that still happens, unfortunately. But as far as DHS criteria, I'm not even going to try and list their criteria. They have specialized training. They have they have their rules to follow and the statute to follow that lets them remove children and then petition the court for the state to take custody. We don't have a weigh in on that at all. We just let them interview or watch us interview the child and be there for that interview, and then go on from there. And whatever disclosure is made, they make the best decision that they can for the child and family. And a lot of times, if you can get a parent that's protective to have that child, and the parent that's alleged to be the perpetrator leave, or boyfriend or girlfriend, that child can remain home and not be removed. Now, if you have a parent who's not protective and they're not going to believe their child and they're going to stick by whoever that person is, if they're in the home, then DHS does not have any choice but to try and find someplace else for that child to be.
Yeah, getting the perp to leave is probably the first and best. I went to a class in San Diego, and there, it was just the city of the whole state, but they actually, in some cases, have a social worker move into the house and stay there 24 hours. I had the same reaction.
Wow. Yeah, we don't have that luxury.
Even so, I mean, if these guys want to get a hold of the little girl, they will anyway. They'll sneak around. It's pretty amazing the things that can go on.
Well, I apparently have lived most of my life not realizing that child trafficking and the level of abuse that we heap on our kids is as terrible as it is. As how is it that we have become that society, or were we always that society? Who are we? Can anybody tell me who we are?
We don't know if we were always. I think if we went up on the street right now and interviewed people going by and said, what do you think of child sexual abuse here? And they would look at us and say, we don't have that here. This is a nice place. It's nice people live here.
I think you'd be surprised to how many people would also say, though, that they had experienced some form of molestation or child sexual abuse, and never reported it. I think that the most reliable studies that they've done are when you have people that can give their answers anonymously, because there's still people who don't want to talk about it. It's affected them, or they've moved, or they feel it's either affected them in a way they haven't been able to deal with it, and it's had negative outcomes for their life, or they've dealt with it as best they can, and they've decided they're going to put it behind them and they're going to move forward, and they're just not ever going to look at it again, and they've lived their life and they don't want to take it out and look at it and talk about it.
I've heard a rumor that you can actually have on the steps behind you up to 20 abuse victims telling their story straight up, and have an entire nation or a chunk of an entire nation in complete denial that it went on, even with the congressman standing there with them, right? Because the Epstein thing is a case in point of how this society is freaked out and incapable of dealing with the concept of child abuse on the ridiculous level it apparently is going on at throughout, in various places in society. And victim shaming is the rule, not the exception. And so how do we get out of that? If we don't believe the children, if we don't take them seriously, if we don't care for them with all of the care that you are giving, and not 1 or 2 or 40 a year, but all of them. Mm-hmm. All of our children deserve this kind of protection from us and the kind of services that you're providing for them.
Speaking of Epstein, they frequently refer to this Epstein situation as a pedophile. Now, as my understanding, that's not a pedophile. He's just somebody that likes young girls.
Yeah,
pedophile
is
somebody who is interested in pretty much prepubescent children, and they exist and they can't be cured. Is kind of the mantra. It's like telling a straight person they want to be a homosexual or vice versa. It's their sexual orientation. The best they can do is monitor them. I attended a seminar one time that was given by a organization. I think they were from California or someplace that actually they were incredibly selective who they took into their treatment program, and they said if they were lucky, they got 5% actually came out with somebody they would feel safe about.
Wow.
It's very difficult to treat an adult sex offender.
In my experience of doing it, again, I was in small towns, so there's not big numbers, but offhand I can think of one that was actually a pedophile, maybe 2, but the others were confused, very sad people. I felt very, very bad for them sometimes. I can't go into all the details of what went on with them, but they actually did develop this scenario, the little girl sitting on their lap, their daughter, and all of a sudden they're slowly getting aroused, and they're thinking that this is over a period of weeks and months or years even, and they're thinking that, well, then she's getting aroused too, something like that. And they've probably been cut off from their what would be their normal sexual impulses, and they convinced themselves that this little girl wants to do this. And I don't think I would call that a pedophile or an incurable person, but I don't know that.
That's just sounds sick to me.
Well, yeah, I didn't say it was a normal person, but I don't think that.
Help us out of this cul-de-sac, Jackie.
Sorry. I don't. The training that I have is in dealing with the children and the advocacy, and I
I've worked with a lot of kids over the years. I've worked in residential care. When I lived in Texas, I've worked with kids in schools. It's and falling into this job has been something that is really continued to spark my passion for kids. And so, I feel like some people who fall into situations where they offend, do I feel bad for them? Do I think that they're confused? They're confused. I don't have a lot of sympathy for someone who chooses to harm a child. I know that sometimes people have made decisions based on their childhood experiences, but there are people who choose to make a positive impact on their community and their world based on their childhood experiences. So it all boils down to choices.
You just turned it to a nicer thought, and I was going to say, as we got maybe 8 minutes to go in the show, anything positive that you can point to that you need some help with? How can the community help you out and take care of our kids better?
Well, our therapist is wanting to, and our advocates, we'd like to see some volunteers that can come in and go through our application process, and then they can be there when the kids are there. And the therapist would like to have somebody to visit with the family or the parent while they're in doing therapy with the child, and back switching out so that they can play with the child while she's talking to the parent. So there's some stuff like that they can do. We prior to COVID, we had a team that came in every other week and cleaned our building for us. The staff do it now, which we're not above doing that, but it'd be helpful if we had people that wanted to come in and do that, or garden, or we have some flower gardens. We're going to be redoing the backyard of the building and putting up a fence so that kids can go back there and play when they're in there for therapy or for an interview. I have a wish list for us on Amazon, but one of my staff said it's not working right now, so I need to go back in and play with that.
I assume you can always use funding too?
Yes, we embarked on this capital campaign. We've had people who have pledged money for it. We've raised about $1.5 million. That was our goal. We're still paying for things that to make the building work. We're also using those funds for, some of the grants that I have won't allow me to buy food, so we use unrestricted funds for buying snacks and juices for the kids when they come.
So you have a website, I assume, that we could...
We do. It's www.wallyshouse.org. And we have a link on that. We have a fundraiser in the spring every year, and in the fall, we're just now planning our second Heroes event. So we have an event where individuals have been nominated as heroes of Curry County's children, and we host a dinner where our team members and community can come together and celebrate those individuals who've made an impact on our field of work here in Curry County. So we don't fundraise for it. We do get some sponsors for it. Attendees can pay for it. We're just about ready to launch that. I finally nailed down my caterer, so we'll be putting that out so people can make food selections and pay to come to that.
Maybe we should have started off with this, but could you kind of quickly go over how Wally's House came about?
Oh, I'd love to. So in 2014, I started as the county's coordinator, director, and interviewer for the child advocacy program that was under our county's district attorney's office. It was not a nonprofit at that time. And Jerry Honeycutt was somebody that I knew from Seroptimus in Gold Beach, and she said, "I know what a child advocacy center is, and that's not a child advocacy center." She said, "I was in the basement of the courthouse. I had an office that housed the computer that recorded the interviews. I had an interview room, and then on the other side of my office, I had another room where grand jury would meet." And so
Just going into the basement in the courthouse would be somewhat intimidating, I think.
there is nothing about that is not intimidating, child-friendly, or trauma-informed. But that was the best that we could do at the
Yes.
time. The multidisciplinary team had the interview room there. If a child required a medical exam, they called the health department. Patty Savage was the pediatric nurse practitioner and our county's designated medical professional. And depending on where she was that day, she'd make arrangements to meet up with the child somewhere at probably one of the health department offices and do that medical. So then Jerry lost Wally to cancer. And she said, "I'm thinking of buying a property from one side of the family trust and then doing something for the community." And one of the options she had was a child advocacy center, which I immediately responded we could call it Wally's house. And that was October of 2014. We'd lost him in August. December, she finished the purchase. March, she started renovations. We moved in October of 2015. And her only caveat to all of that was you have to create a nonprofit. And when the nonprofit is sustainable, I'll donate the building to the nonprofit. So in 2020, she donated the building to our nonprofit. And you're looking at a woman who knew that the word nonprofit, but didn't know the first thing about creating one or running one. And it was.
And now you are one.
We are one. We are one. We got our nonprofit designation in 2016. I've had wonderful board members and supportive board members, wonderful community members. The staff that we have are very dedicated, very passionate about intervening where there's child abuse. And I'm really excited about our prevention specialist and getting her out into the community and getting our community educated on.
That prevention is a very important thing. Does she go to school? And I know the thing that we would try to teach a child is that it's not okay. You don't have to. I know when my aunts used to come, and I hated this. They'd kiss me with all their makeup, and they want to pinch my cheek. Or the butcher would want to. And that's not good anymore.
No.
If the kid doesn't like it, the kid could say to the butcher, "Don't do that. I don't like that."
Yeah, we have a video that we take to Safety City, and the kids get to watch it. It's called "I Am the Boss of My Body."
Yeah.
That was basically my prevention program for a number of years. So, yeah, Kobe is our prevention specialist, and she is trained in darkness to light, and she has some other presentations to do as well. So we're looking forward to that program taking off.
Wow.
I had a foster kid for a short period of time who was heavily trained in that, and it didn't take anything for her to, "No, you can't do that." I can.
Well,
I'm not hurting you. I just,
right.
yeah.
The adults need to know, too, that to respect when a child, if we get to, as adults, say who can and can't touch us, we need to say to the child, okay. I've had many relatives say, "Oh, go kiss your Auntie Jackie." And the kid's like, I'm like, "No, leave them alone. They'll come say hi when they want to." And they do.
That's the music that says it's almost over.
Almost.
Or actually, it is over.
Thank you, Jackie, for joining us and telling us all about Wally's house, because that's a beautiful thing. We need help.
Wally'sHouse.org. Get your credit card out and send them some money.
Thank you for your invitation.